Welcome to another edition of Crafted Quickies. And now...
Hello everyone! Welcome back to another exciting episode of Crafted Quickies. Today I'll be looking at an indie game called Klang from Tinimation Studios. Now then, Klang is a rhythm platformer game that totes itself on being very punishing but fair. And since it was touting to have Blind doing the tunes, I was sold on giving it a go. And before I get started, I want to give a big special thank you to Blind and the lovely people at Tinimations who hooked me up with the press key. Just for disclosure, I did not purchase this game, although I did kind of purchase the soundtrack. But more on that later. Let's get started.
As previously mentioned, Klang is an indie game from a studio called Tinimations, which is based in Hamar, part of Norway. Now, if you really haven't heard of Blind, he's a pioneer in remixing video game music. The man has a decade of remixes under his belt, with works paying homage to Metroid, Final Fantasy, and even Chrono Trigger. You can freely listen to all of his jams on SoundCloud. I'll put a link in the description for you guys. Moving on, the game itself is a bit of a mix-up in the traditional rhythm game formula. The gameplay uses the tempo of the music as the player's action, controlling the timing for both platforming and combat. Now, it's worth mentioning in this early of my review that you really will need a moderately competent computer or laptop to play this game. Since the game loads all of its assets all at the same time, older computers will definitely have some difficulties with this game. The trade-off to this decision is that the game barely has any load times, and it'll really keep the momentum going once you start getting into the groove of the game. As for the art direction of this game, I'm really digging it. It seems like the classic retro look of the 80s is coming back, thanks to games like Far Cry Blood Dragon and the indie movie shorts like Kung Fury. The art style matches perfectly with the music's rhythm-induced trance, and definitely amps the experience to keep the player engaged. All the environments of the game are beautifully detailed and visually pleasing to the eyes. Once the player hits that glowy start button, the story goes as follows. We see our Klang guy hanging around wanting to talk about Street Fighter. Then dickhead Zeus comes out and is like, "Sup, bro?" and sends Klang guy flying off into Nintendo Land. Or, at least that's how I interpreted the story. At this point, our Klang guy gets his dual blades and we're blasted off into EDM land to start the game. Now, I want to point out, for games with no dialogue, this is an effective way to show the player who we need to defeat. That being said, this is by far my favorite way to introduce players to the mechanics of the game. With each new section we press onward to, the player is provided with new challenges to get past. Some of the game mechanics that the game provides, smashing the stick in a direction to avoid or parry damage, smashing the shoulder button to avoid taking damage, and even avoiding the bright lights to not take a deathly amount of damage. The game gives the player an easy low-tempo prologue to get familiarized with the controls, along with how the game works and with its platforming, which is nice, since after about 15 minutes, the game brings in insta-death platforming levels. Dick move, game. Dick move. And here's where I think I ran into my first set of bugs in the game. I'm not sure if this is intentional or not, but when the bridges changed to the tempo of the song, I was getting killed over and over and over until I think the stage finally fixed itself so I could properly get across. Moving on from that, the game starts throwing a lot of platforming challenges at the player when being attacked by what appears to be a flying bat. At this point, it forces the player to put everything that they've learned thus far into practice, and adding the pressure of having to do it while running for your life. I'm not going to lie, it actually did a good job of preparing me for future stages. But before we get introduced to the world map, we find out that this batty asshole trying to kill Klang Boy was none other than Ratchet. Now, the world map aspect actually took me by surprise, since prior to this we had no indication that we had the ability to do so for the first 15 minutes of gameplay. Now, the map is colorful and a little bit charming, so it lets you replay previously cleared zones for improving your score, and gives you the access to the Pirate Bay, which in turn is a nice little music box to relax to. Personally, I love games that have a huge part of its own production dedicated to game music. and having included a jukebox in-game to listen to, perfect. It's the little touches that can really make a game enjoyable to replay or leave running in the background to listen to. So when you first get to the jukebox, you'll notice it's woefully locked. Thanks to the world map function, the player can replay the levels that they've already cleared to look for challenge rooms in order to snag the little music keys. The first few rooms are pretty simple, but I'd imagine the later ones to not only be tough to find, but even tougher to clear. Once you break your body into the groove of playing the game, it does get much easier to play, and feels great when you pull out those sick beats without dying. Now, if I had to choose the best parts of the game to tell you about, sure, I could say that a lot of the levels had really cool platforming or gimmicks, but that would be a lie. Easily the best parts of the game are the boss fights. Each boss introduces its own stratagem and a song to accompany it, making it quite memorable and frustrating to learn the rhythm. You know, I don't really want to spoil too much of the game, since this isn't a full-on review, but I did want to get across my overall experience with Klang. Even though I've been talking good things about this game, I did really have some gripes with it as well. Earlier on, I briefly touched upon about a couple of challenges with insta-death punishments, but thankfully those levels are pretty short, and checkpoints are often enough to not send you packing too far back on bigger levels. This really didn't bug me all that much, but I could see other players finding it really annoying. But I really did have one issue that really detracted from my experience from Klang. In this level in particular, where you need to move the platform that Klang Boy is standing on to defend himself, the notes aren't exactly in sync with the stage's music and tempo. Which is kind of going against everything this game has taught us up to this point about keeping a beat to succeed. But even after that, the following part of the exact same stage. In the platforming section, I think I ran into some issues since the enemy here would not shoot a creative ridge bullet quick enough before my current one disappeared, and as a result killing me. Now mind you, I did overcome this, but it was a frustrating 10 minutes for a relatively simple section of the game.
So, overall, what did I really think of this game? If I'm being honest with myself, I thought this game was great. The game is simple to learn, music is wonderful to jam out to, and was challenging but not overly punishing thanks to its frequent checkpoints. Aside from the game's great tunes, the art of Klang was the biggest appeal. I really digged its look from start to finish. It had some interesting environments, memorable boss fights, and doesn't overstay its welcome with the main campaign, seeing how it took me only about an hour and 20 minutes to complete the game on my first playthrough, but that could vary depending on your player skill. So is this game really worth its price of admission of $17? Honestly, yes. I kinda wish for that price point too they included the soundtrack as well, but, you know, maybe at a sale. Granting all of this, I can't praise enough the soundtrack of this game. If you guys really dig EDM music, I highly recommend that you guys purchase the game's soundtrack. Overall, I think I would rate this game an 8 out of 10. I ran into a few things that took away from my experience, but looking back, I had a great time from start to finish.